This video is brought to you by Captivating History. Jesse James is one of history's most notorious outlaws. He was a PR mastermind who sold himself as a heroic Robin Hood figure with a gentlemanly disposition. Many people bought into this self-spun legend, and he would become something of a folk hero to poorer Americans living in the South, although we may consider him a cold-blooded killer in modern times. One of the most successful thieves of all time, only a brutal betrayal from one of his own men would finally bring him down. Jesse James was born in 1847, the son of a Baptist minister, and he grew up in Clay County, Missouri, where his father preached to many people as part of the Second Great Awakening, the Protestant revival in the U.S. Although his father would die when he was only 3 years old, his mother would remarry 2 more times, and the family eventually became quite comfortable. The family owned 7 slaves who worked the small family farm, and Jesse grew up in relative peace on the estate of his brother Frank and his sister Susan. But trouble was on the horizon. Jesse grew up in the difficult period leading to the American Civil War, and Missouri in particular was a contested border state. Its citizens harshly split between those loyal to the Union and those who believed in the Confederate cause. In 1861, war officially broke out, and Jesse's family was firmly in the pro-slavery Confederate camp. Frank, Jesse's older brother, was keen to support the cause, so he joined the Missouri State Guard as soon as possible, fighting in several major battles quite early in the conflict. Not long after the war, Frank fell ill and he was sent home on parole. He was captured by Union troops, who made him sign the Oath of Allegiance to the Union. Undeterred, Frank joined the pro-Confederate guerrilla band, the Bushwhackers. The Bushwhackers were not officially connected to the Confederate Army. They were a grassroots movement that looted towns and ambushed Union troops. Before the war ended, they would also become infamous for carrying out many atrocious acts of violence. Because his brother was in the Bushwhackers, and because Jesse's headstrong mother was a very outspoken supporter of slavery, one day in 1863, Union militiamen showed up at Jesse's home with guns. They repeatedly hung Jesse's stepfather from a tree until he was almost dead, demanding to know the guerrilla leader's location, and they whipped teenage Jesse while he watched. After they broke Jesse's stepfather, they left, but James would not take the humiliation lightly. From that day forward, he began a path of bloody revenge. At the tender age of 16, Jesse also signed up to join the Bushwhackers, serving under the infamous Bloody Bill Anderson, who carried out many well-known acts of cruelty during the war. Many historians believe that Anderson himself was actually a psychopath, as he took no prisoners during the war and he horribly mutilated the people he killed. Jesse James would have been present for many of these killings while looting towns and shooting and scalping unarmed Union soldiers. Jesse was also present at one of the most brutal and best-remembered Bushwhacker raids from the war, the Centralia Massacre. In 1864, Bill Anderson's gang arrived in the town of Centralia, looking to disrupt the railway tracks running through the town. While there, they stripped a band of 24 unarmed Unionist soldiers naked and shot them at point-blank range. The Civil War soon drew to a close in 1865. Many guerrillas quickly surrendered under the general amnesty, giving up their arms and taking the oath of allegiance to the Union. However, as Jesse and his men approached Lexington under the white flag of truce, a fight broke out between them and the Union soldiers. Jesse later recounted that he was going to Lexington to take the amnesty himself when the soldiers fired on him. Others claimed that Jesse and his fellow guerrillas launched an unprovoked attack on the soldiers. Whatever the truth of the matter, Jesse was gravely injured during the fight when a bullet hit him in the chest, entering his lung. Close to death, Jesse escaped to a nearby farmhouse. During his lengthy recovery from the gruesome injury, Jesse finally took the oath of allegiance to the Union. His cousin, Zerelda, or Z, nursed him back to health, and Jesse fell deeply in love with her for her gentle kindness, starting a 10-year courtship that would end in marriage. Although it seemed as if Jesse's days of violence were at an end, by this point, violence was all that he knew, and like many other young men who grew up during the Civil War, he was soon lost and looking to join a new gang. After the war, the James family had been banned from Clay County, Missouri for their wartime activity, and Jesse and his brother Frank quickly fell back in with other ex-bushwhackers who understood them. It is believed that in these early years after the Civil War, Jesse and Frank were working with the Archie Clement Gang, an ex-Confederate guerrilla group who robbed banks now that the war was over. The gang is most famous for their daring robbery of the Clay County Savings Bank in 1866, during which the thieves stole almost $60,000, about $1 million in today's terms. While Jesse's presence in the gang has never been definitively confirmed, many historians believe he was likely present during this daring heist. Not until 1869 did Jesse James personally become famous. On December 7th of that year, Jesse and his brother Frank stormed into a bank in Gallatin, Missouri. During the robbery, Jesse shot the cashier, believing he was Samuel P. Cox, the man who killed Jesse's old buddy from the Bushwhackers, Bloody Bill Anderson. Frank and Jesse found very little money in the bank, and they soon rushed out to leave. But one of the brothers was thrown from his horse and dragged across the ground. Both brothers then climbed onto the same mount and rode off into the distance. News of the murder and the brothers' daring escape made the newspapers. After Jesse and Frank were both identified and condemned for the incident, Jesse wrote an astonishing letter to the state governor, proclaiming his innocence. Jesse wrote in his letter that he was not involved in the robbery, but he would never receive a fair trial, so he would not turn himself in. The strange debacle made Jesse famous, and soon many stories about Jesse and his new gang of outlaws spread by word of mouth. Jesse's gang, which included the famous younger brothers, Cole, Jim, John, and Bob, began robbing banks and stagecoaches across the country, and they gradually became more and more well-known to the public. Jesse, in particular, had a flair for showmanship and dramatic storytelling, and he would use it to his advantage to sell himself as a folk hero. In one well-known example, during one robbery in 1871, Jesse and his gang robbed a bank in Croydon, Iowa, before interrupting a political rally outside a Methodist church to tell the crowd they might want to head over to the bank to untie the employees. Before long, the gang was holding up banks and trains across the U.S., and Jesse was leaving press releases at the scenes of his crimes and writing letters to newspapers explaining his actions. He claimed to be a Robin Hood-type character in these letters, but there is no evidence he ever gave any of the money he stole away. One story that spread like wildfire was that Jesse inspected the hands of the men he was robbing, leaving alone all those hard-working ordinary men whose hands were calloused by honest labor. Jesse's publicity stunts had an unlikely supporter in the form of a newspaper editor and ex-Confederate Major John Newman Edwards. Edwards was fascinated by Jesse James and sold him to the public as a daring anti-hero for the South who supported the Confederates' lost cause. Edwards' newspaper, the Kansas City Times, praised Jesse and his men, describing them as gallant knights and Confederate heroes. Many were captivated by the outlaw's story, born from the old Civil War grievances. Many Southerners saw the banks that Jesse robbed as extortion rackets that took money from local people. Edwards also took pains to stress that Jesse was polite and chivalrous, only killing when absolutely necessary. It remains unclear how much has been invented about the outlaw and how much is true to this day. As Jesse's reputation skyrocketed, the James Younger game hit bigger and bigger targets. In July 1873, the gang hit the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad. The group waited until the train hit a bend and was forced to slow down while bending and destroying a part of the tracks to force it to a grinding halt. This was one of the first train robberies on record in the U.S., and it shocked the nation. The gang had worn KKK masks during the attack, a clear display of their political affiliations, and the crime made national newspapers, although the gang found very little when they raided the train. A year later, in 1874, Jesse finally married his sweetheart, Z. However, settled life did not deter him from his criminal activities, and he supposedly even robbed a stagecoach on his honeymoon in Texas. Nor was Jesse deterred by all those who tried to catch him, including the famous Pinkerton Detective Agency, a group of investigators known for protecting President Lincoln. While Pinkerton detectives hunted Jesse for many years, they never got close to apprehending him. In one particularly reckless attempt to catch the bandit in 1875, Pinkerton agents threw an iron weight wrapped in flammable material into Jesse's stepfather's house. When the device hit the chimney and exploded, Jesse's 8-year-old half-brother was tragically killed in the resulting explosion, and Jesse's mother lost her arm. The senseless attack only made Jesse and Frank James more popular, as many people saw the attack as an act of cowardly violence. While Jesse and his gang seemed to ride on a high, their luck eventually ran out. In 1876, the group planned to rob the First National Bank of Northfield, Minnesota, because it was rumored that the vaults contained something in the region of $75,000. During the attempted robbery, the gang members standing outside the bank alerted a passing medical student's suspicions. The young man, named Henry Wheeler, was driven away by the gang, but rather than running off, he found a gun, and soon he shot at the robbers from the third-story window of a nearby hotel. Meanwhile, in the bank, the cashier refused to open the bank's vault, claiming it was on a time lock and there was nothing he could do. The bank's teller made a break for it, running out into the street and yelling to the townspeople that the bank was being robbed. Before long, an angry mob had formed outside, and a shootout began between the gang members and some of the braver townsfolk. Several of the gang members were shot dead, while several others sustained serious injuries. When the bank staff remained uncooperative, the gang shot the cashier dead and fled the town, stealing just $26.60 from the bank. The Northfield robbery was a painful and humiliating defeat for the James Younger gang, and it ultimately destroyed them. While fleeing the scene, an argument broke out between the exhausted robbers, and Jesse and Frank split off from the Younger brothers, agreeing to go their separate ways. A massive manhunt was enacted. The Younger brothers did not last long and were soon cornered in another gunfight, after which they were arrested. Frank and Jesse got away, but they spent several years out of action, laying low. Newspapers circulated rumors that the James brothers had finally been killed, and Frank James ultimately gave up the life altogether, enjoying the peace of mind that came with ordinary living. However, while it would take him a while to recover from the Northfield disaster, by 1879, Jesse had formed a new gang with his friend Charlie Ford and others. The group carried out a string of robberies and petty thefts, most famously stopping a train in Glendale, Missouri. But this new chapter of Jesse's life was a short one. When word got out that Jesse James had returned and was holding up trains again, the railroad companies offered a massive $10,000 cash reward for the capture of Jesse and Frank, dead or alive. Jesse's new gang was not as trustworthy as his old one, and soon the temptation to turn Jesse got to his new gang members. Jesse's trusted friend Charlie Ford and his little brother Bob, who had recently joined the gang, hatched a plot to get rid of Jesse. In 1882, the group stayed at Jesse's house, hoping to plan their next heist, while Jesse's wife looked after them. But one morning, April 3rd, when Jesse took off his guns to stand on a chair and straighten a painting, the 20-year-old Bob Ford shot Jesse James in the back of the head. The infamous outlaw had finally met with his inglorious end. After hearing of Jesse's death, Frank James would soon turn himself into the authorities. Although still popular, he was promptly acquitted. Jesse's death would make the young Bob Ford famous, and Bob even went on tours telling the story of how he killed Jesse James. But he only got a little of the reward money for the killing, and he was even tried for Jesse's murder before later being pardoned. Many people felt that Bob was a coward for shooting Jesse while his back was turned, and Bob would later fade into obscurity before he was murdered by one of his enemies. On the other hand, Jesse James passed into legend, and to this day, he is still one of the best-known outlaws of all time. To learn more about Jesse James, check out our book, Jesse James, a captivating guide to the Wild West outlaw who robbed trains, banks, and stagecoaches across the Midwestern United States. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free Mythology Bundle ebook while still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.